Welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of Important Work. I'm your host, Chris Angel, and I'm here with my guest today, Jasmine Elatab. Hi.
Hi, thank
Hi,
you
Jasmine.
so much for having me. I'm so excited.
I know. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. You and I met last summer at an event in Portland called Show Up Live, and the energy in that room was so amazing.
Oh my God.
We're going to talk about the divine feminine today, and I just felt like there was a lot of amazing divine energy in that room last summer, and I can't wait to hear.
And it's crazy because I don't know if you remember that. Do you remember my topic or no? Because it's evolved quite a bit.
I don't.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about that as we connected. So what I talked about then was toxic feminine energy how I learned it about myself and how it was really disruptive.
Oh, that's right.
And yeah, a lot of stories there. And I didn't really know that diving into that and like looking into my layers was going to bring me to this piece in the evolution. And it's been really, really interesting to see how it's unfolded. That was only step one for me. And here we are today. So yeah.
And here we are. Yeah. I put that, I put out the feelers on Facebook for like, who speaks to the divine feminine, because I really feel like for, we said this before we hit record, but important work to me, the importantness in work is that divine, we want to make the world a better place. I think that's divine energy, divine feminine energy. And so for people to unleash their important work, I think there has to be a conversation somewhere in here about what the divine feminine is. How do we invite that in more? And here you and I are having that conversation. So what do you do? Can you give everybody just a sense, the world of like what you do? What do you do professionally or in the world?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. So I guess I'll give you as much as you want to hear. So what strikes people as odd or interesting is that half of my life is still as a family law attorney. I started my own practice pretty much out of law school. And I am also a coach. And what I tend to attract is people who want to work on energy in their heart. And that ends up being healing the divine feminine energy. And really, like you said, unleash. I usually use the term reawaken because we all have it, which is really interesting. And then the closer you come to your heart and the closer you come to the layers that need healing, the more you're naturally in that feminine energy. And then everything is birthed from there.
Yeah. Love that. So good. What, when your coaching is what, like life coaching, or how do you describe that?
Yeah, I would describe it as life coaching. It ends up being a combination of people working on healing and kind of deeper trauma, and then people who want to manifest from that place. So what I've noticed for myself and in other people, it's people who want to get from A to Z, but they're not seeing that they have all these other layers to heal. And it ends up being, an intimacy with your heart and healing deeper things. And then from there, once they've healed it, they can create everything that they want.
Yeah, really good. So tell me about your relationship to the word divine feminine. Like what does that mean to you? What is the world of all that?
Okay. So to me, it is like the essence of pure love. It's everything that we have within ourselves before it's been disrupted or before we've hidden behind layers of fear or scarcity or anything else. So it's everything that is the purest sense of love. It's creation energy, it's expression energy, it's playful energy, it's life. It's everything that we have before fear existed within us, because fear is sometimes that masculine energy, that doing energy.
Yeah.
The feminine is everything that makes us alive. It's the spiritual energy, it's the wisdom, it's just life force energy that lives inside of us and is waiting to come through.
Yeah. So good. While we're in the divine feminine conversation, how do you see divine masculine? What do you think that is?
Yeah. I love this conversation equally. That's what so why everybody kind of tagged me in it is because I did a masterclass on the divine feminine, divine masculine, because as my work has progressed, I've seen how the two relate completely to each other. So the way I describe it is the divine feminine is feeling and emotion and expression and being close to your heart. And the divine masculine is that space that holds everything in place, that container for feeling. That's an embodied divine masculine energy. It's the doing energy and the pursuit energy and the action taking energy, but it also holds a space for the feminine energy. Yeah. So the example that I gave on our call was, if you think about the ocean, the feminine energy is the waves, the chaos, the ebb and flow of water, and the parameter is the masculine. So everything functions together. The masculine can't work without the feminine can't work without the masculine. And people really loved that analogy. So the divine masculine, if you think about, I think you said earlier something about, everything comes back down to our divine feminine energy. And when I talk about it, I talk about how the divine feminine is our connection to truth and purpose. And then the masculine is the action taker. Yeah. So the way I describe manifesting anything is in order to create the life we want, we have to be in touch with what's coming up in our heart. And then the masculine energy takes those steps for us. And then there's some layers in between that.
Yeah. I love it. So take me to some of the breakdown that you see, right? If this is, because I love the world of when I envision divine masculine, divine feminine working together. It's a beautiful picture. And then there is like where we are now, which is like, there's a whole lot of breakdown, right? So where does the breakdown happen, do you think, in divine feminine and masculine, et cetera?
Yeah. So, okay. A few things come up for me, but the first thing is I think that a lot of people have a misconception around what that language means and what the energy means. We each have masculine and feminine within us. Right. We all just get to decide what we align with most. I tend to align with the feminine energy because I like playing, and I'm like a ball of emotions all the time. And I feel best when I'm fully expressed. So I align with my feminine energy and what feels good for me. And that comes to play in certain areas of life. And then there's other times where I have to wear have my masculine energy out when I'm in business and things like that. So a lot of what I see is that people tend to reject or denounce certain parts of themselves because they don't think that's the way they ought to be. Like I've met people who think, oh, I should be more in my feminine, so I should act this way. But really that's just rejecting parts of yourself if you tend to align with the masculine, and vice versa. I also think that a lot of people tend to think, oh, to be in my feminine, it's attractive to be, quote, in my feminine. That means I have to look a certain way or wear certain clothes. I mean, look at me right now. Like, we joked about this before we hit record, but it's not anything about the way you look. It's all an essence that you have coming out of your heart. It's all like radiating heart energy. It has nothing to do with your appearance whatsoever. So in order to be in your feminine, it's really just a matter of how close are you to your heart? How connected are you to your emotions and everything that comes from there? That's simply what it means to be in feminine energy. And then there are times where your masculine energy wants to come up, and we get to decide whether or not we allow it. And like I said, it's vice versa for, people, the masculine who sometimes comes into the feminine. And it's really just a matter of finding the perfect integration for yourself. I think a lot of times there's issues when something I talk about a lot with clients is that if, let's say, for example, a woman tends to align with the feminine energy, but she's constantly in the doing and pursuing, she burns out very, very quickly. And we see that a lot with entrepreneurs or people who are really focused on business or, law school. Everything around us, we're focused on achievement and how much money we have in the bank, but it doesn't give you a chance to be with your heart or be an expression. And then you find yourself and you're never feeling good because you're constantly in the masculine when you feel better when you're in your feminine. And then another example I would give is that there's, what I learned on the master class is that there are these group of beautiful men, like showing up in their like embodied masculine energy, who only learns on that call that, oh, you know what, feminine actually like it when the masculine gets to access their heart space. It was the first time for them that they heard, oh, to be in, quote, attractive masculine energy where you can attract a partner who is in their feminine energy, it means you also get to meet your heart's edge. So even to be in that masculine energy, you also need to allow yourself to have space to access your feminine energy in all kinds of ways. So it comes up all of the time in spiritual union, in how you balance your work life. It's constantly seeing where you are at and what feels best for you. And then everything else flows from there.
If we went to the conversation of like mirror neurons for a minute, and we're like how IB sort of reflects over there to you. And so somehow your mirror neurons will like react to that. Like if I show up angry, that creates something over there in your space. Right. Yeah. I think when there is this, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. There's this cultural, like just way of being where wounded masculine is what created so much of what we have in industry.
Yeah.
And then there was no space for divine feminine to show up in that. And so we had wounded feminine showing up and interacting with wounded masculine. And this was the way it was, the cultural agreement of like how we're going to evolve, I guess.
Yes.
And so I want to know like how, because I feel like part of what is happening and what needs to happen more is for there to be space for divine feminine to show up. So how do we begin to, men or women, how do we begin to create space for divine feminine to show up?
So what's really interesting is that, it's this cultural understanding. And in fact, it led to all this separation. And there is so many layers of healing when it comes to the feminine energy, because we've taken it on for so many generations that there's still this idea that it's not safe to express yourself, or it's not safe to exist, whether it's literally dangerous or you're going to be rejected because your ideas don't have value. There's so many layers. But what I have noticed is that when there is space in when a divine masculine creates space for the divine feminine to just exist and to just be, they thrive. It is their fuel to be around that love and light and expressive energy. And they want to do more, and they want to provide more, and everything comes from there. And as a result, the divine feminine feels, oh, it's safe to express myself. It's safe to give. And the cycle becomes really, really beautiful. When it comes to allowing the divine feminine, I think that it's going to mean that there needs to be some space to be made. And I think the reality is that it requires the divine masculine to provide that space, like anything else, because there's still a lot of fear. Anytime somebody wants to step into that light, they don't know, is there going to be something that stops me? Is it safe to do that? It's constantly going to be, is it a question of whether or not they'll be accepted in that divine light or not? But I am seeing more and more, and maybe just a result of everything I've welcomed into my life, but there is a great desire, I think, for divine feminine energy in all areas of life. When I see the way that I show up in life, even in lawyer life, like I show up exactly, whoever you're getting right here is how I operate when I'm in the courtroom too. And it creates really beautiful relationships in times of very high conflict.
Yeah.
So there is a space for it, but it's going to take someone to be able to create that space.
Yep.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Because it points back to the thing about where when masculine starts to get to the heart edge, right? The edge of the heart feeling, that then back to the mirror neurons thing, like there is a place where when I as a man, or me in masculine energy, can get to my heart and feeling, and you get to interact with that, you recognize something in it for yourself. You're like, I recognize the empathy and the love and the safety in this space that's created, which is why that's attractive.
It's all safety. And if you think about it, the only reason that the wounded masculine exists is because it's a scared little boy that doesn't feel like it's safe to express either.
Right. Totally.
A wounded masculine is the same as a wounded feminine. It all comes from fear. It's just different, quote, different wound sources, but it's all coming from the same place. It's a scared little child who doesn't feel like it's safe to exist. So the wounded masculine is their, recourse is control and possess and power, because they never want to feel scared. It's different recourse for feminine energy, but it's still wounded when it comes to that. Yeah.
This is fun. This is so many places that could go, right?
I
love, the implications as it relates to relationships and partnerships, as it relates to how we do business. I mean, ultimately my tribe, I love spending time in the business space, which is, by the way, an entire industry built around wounded masculine energy of like, how do we market in a way that is manipulative or tries to get what we want to get versus how do we create space for others to thrive in our marketing? Like that's a whole different conversation, you know?
And if you think about it, that's all based on scarcity, right? Like if we're manipulating people, it's because we have a fear that something is scarce, which is all wounded energy.
Right. Totally.
Whereas if you're in the divine feminine energy and you take that into business, you're like, oh, love here, love there, everybody's included, it's a completely different energy around it.
What, this just popped up for me. So when I think about, there is this, I really want this conversation to be accessible to those who are curious, and maybe this is new, right? I think sometimes when you talk about when the divine feminine is talked about, or divine masculine, I think a lot of times it can get disregarded just because it feels like woo-woo stuff. And I really want this. I want people to hear. I don't think our tribe is like that, but I do want this to be able to spread further to people who are on the edges of this conversation. Like how is this not just woo-woo stuff?
Yeah. Okay. So number one, this is such an important conversation, and I could literally talk about it forever, because it is I think in general, the population would be surprised how well the masculine energy takes to it. When I first started talking about it to men, I was like, they're not going to want it because it's woo-woo. Like they're not into it. But it applies to every area of life, because if you ask any man, is it important to you to have a relationship with your partner, with your mother, with your sister? Their answer is yes. Okay. So it applies to every relationship they're going to have. It could be a spiritual partnership, or a union of some sort. It doesn't need to be spiritual. We don't want to get woo woo, but it relates to any partnership, but it also relates to how they build their business all the time. And if they incorporate some aspects of touching their feminine energy, this is something I talk about all the time. And I've actually recently attracted more male clients than female clients. I think partially because we opened this can of worms, but there is a piece of you that needs to be able to access your feminine energy in order for your business to thrive. Sort of what you said, but it's a completely different angle than anything I've preached, in that at any moment, it's a balance of do, and being able to access when your burnout is coming. Because I think we can all agree, when you're in burnout energy, are you making more money or are you in stagnant energy?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
All of a sudden everything stops, right? No matter what you do, it's almost like the more you force it, the more you try to control it, all wounded masculine, the harder it feels to create business. If in those moments you're like, oh, something does not feel good, let me access my intuition, the feminine energy. What feels good right now? Asking yourself those questions. What feels good? Feminine energy. And being able to give it to yourself and source it to yourself. All of a sudden, if it's like, oh, you know what, a mental health day or a trip for 5 days away, in that minute, being able to give to yourself, all of a sudden nourishes you in a way where your business thrives, your relationships thrive, everything starts to thrive again. So it's always taking into consideration what you need. And those needs are all tapping into that feminine energy.
That's really good. As you were describing that, it makes me think of just how important it is for the masculine to hold space for the divine feminine to rise. And so part of that then, if, I think as men, we're more, we identify more with the masculine energy, because that's just part of how, what we got when we got it. But I think I love that you say that, because you're putting it in terms of productivity. Yeah. You're framing it for me in terms of productivity, which is currency for me. I'm like, oh, right. So if I want to produce better, I should get more in touch with the feminine energy. Yeah. Right? Because that's where creativity, intuition comes from. Yes, exactly. And that applies to literally any business I can ever think of. I've had conversations with my brother, who is the most anti woo-woo, doesn't understand Jasmine person in the world. And even him, he's like, oh, that does make sense. Even if you take away the labels of everything. Right. Yes. And so that, for that very reason, then I can see that holding space, that as men, the more we can find our empathy and take time off to recharge, allow women to have space also. Like, I just think there's a lot of work for us as men to do to allow the divine feminine to show up. Yeah. And I mean, also think about, I don't even think this is where you're going with it, but think about the divine masculine, divine feminine within yourself. You keep saying hold space. How about if you hold space for yourself every day and you ask yourself, what do I need? Perfect. Yeah. What do I need today? I can guarantee if you I make all my clients do this all the time. You ask yourself every morning, what does my heart need? What does my soul need? What does my body need? And I mean, I haven't used that on my male clients, but why not? Right. So not? Yeah. If you're accessing that and asking yourself every day what feels nourishing, I can guarantee you will show up as a better partner. You will show up better in business. You are making sure that all your cup is full so you can be fully present in the moment. So if you extend that to how, the masculine, meaning for the purposes of this conversation, we'll say the men in the world, and the feminine, the women in the world show up, everything would flow better. You're constantly both fueling each other in every which way because you're both being heard. Yeah. It's so good. Yeah. I mean, I could talk about it forever because it applies to every area of life. It applies to nature. It applies to business. It applies to partnerships. It applies everywhere. Everywhere. Yeah. And I think this is what like if we, I don't talk politics, but if I looked at the landscape of I don't either governing, right? And I looked at the landscape of things, there's just a lot of wounded energy interacting with wounded energy, right? From both sides. It doesn't matter the side. It's just, and so like when you talk about both divine feminine and masculine working together and everything gets better. Yeah. Like there is this return to empathy, this return to the heart that if, and I'll just say as men, because that's where I can speak from, as men, the more we can return to our heart, the more we can hold space for ourselves. And if we are familiar with how it feels to hold space for ourselves, we can hold space for others. Yes. Right. It's so beautiful. Like I'm not a politics person either,
but I always joke about like, put me in a room with, and we won't use a name, put me in a room with this person
Yeah.
and let me just like have a conversation with his heart. There's a scared little boy underneath that. Scared little boy. And a lot of time, all that wounded masculine energy needs is to know that their feelings have a place to be expressed.
Right.
And they have done everything to reject that.
Right.
So our world would operate completely differently if the, you know, the leaders of our country, of our world knew that there got to be a balance where it wasn't, we didn't have to exist in this fearful energy, that there is a place to hold space, the masculine, and then a place for our feelings to be felt. And that's all feminine. And it's constantly happening within us. And then the goal is for it to be happening outside of our world, externally.
Yeah. I love this. I love the feeling of this conversation where there's a seeking to understand. When I was in college, I read Men Are From Mars, Women Were From Venus. And just, I think what John Gray did with that book was create some understanding, which was so valuable to me as a man. I remember, I think the only paragraph I ever remember in that book was just like, women don't want you to solve their problems. And I was like, really? Oh, wow. Yes. And it changed the whole dynamic, right? Because then I could just listen instead of trying to mansplain things to people. I could just listen.
Right. And that's all holding space, right? And I never read that book. I remember like hearing about it when I was younger, but there's so many misunderstandings when you're trying to help each other. And it's almost like you step to you skip to a step ahead because you want to fix, because you think that's what the man has to do, when it's really just hold space, give me a space to express. And that makes the feminine feel safe. It's always that. Yeah. And honestly, like if the feminine feels safe, this is the key that once it like registers in people's head, they're like, oh, this is how the world works. If the feminine feels safe, that is everything. Because if the feminine feels safe, we're going to say she shows up authentically as herself. And then all you get is a complete source of love. There is no stopping the love that flows out of her heart. I mean, think about your wife. Think about, I don't know if you have a daughter. Do you have a daughter?
Yeah.
You have a mother, think about that person when they are in their complete energy of complete trust in that moment. It's all the radiance that streams out. It's all the creativity. It's only complete divine, pure love. And then who wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of that? Doesn't that fuel you to do everything that you want to do as a man? Doesn't it make you want to do more for them?
Right. Yeah. When I know how to provide the things that make their life better, I want to, I feel like I'm hardwired for that. I want to go but without understanding that, then where I go is, how do I fix it? Because I think in my productive energy that's how it's going to make it better for you. When in reality, when I understand that what you just need is space to feel safe, that's what I get to provide.
And it's so beautiful, because isn't that easier to just be able to hold space instead of thinking that you have to do something else? All we need to do is know that we feel safe, and then everything else kind of is birthed from there completely.
Yeah. Wow, what a fun conversation.
I love it.
We should do some more, but for now, I'll say thank you for all that you shared today. If people want to reach out to you and learn more about the coaching you do, et cetera, how do people connect with you?
Okay, so the best way to find me is on Instagram, and my handle is soulfully _you. It's SOULFULLY. And otherwise, it's just on Facebook, Jasmine Elatab, the name on here. And you can find all my content there.
Jasmine, thank you so much for your time. I love this conversation. I'm excited to see where else we go in these kind of interviews, but this has been really fun.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Okay, bye. Do you have important work in the world? We can help you produce a show just like this one and get your message out in the world. Go to mygroundswell.com to connect with us now.